Cricket media used to be pretty simple. Find your favourite newspaper, head to Cricinfo, and maybe a blog you'd like. Now just finding the best stories and writing is a huge challenge. You already have a job. You just want to read about cricket. Well, that is what the best of cricket is currently doing. They go out daily to find the newest cricket coverage and the best stories from any publication in the world. And when they can't discover what they want, they also hire some of the best writers to produce their own great stories. You can get the best of cricket via their website or on WhatsApp. They find cricket's best stories and give them to you every day. Hello everyone and welcome to Morning Glory. I'm a little bit late, and part of the reason was obviously the rain changed things, but I just went back and watched every ball of that bowling spell again, it was such a bizarre mini session and what just happened. So I just wanted to make sure I hadn't seen it incorrectly. I'll probably watch it again. In fact, if we have rain later on, I might watch it a few more times. Really just a bizarre, weird few moments of cricket, all things considered. Morning Glory, essentially what we do here is we talk about you ask the questions and I answer them. As simple as that. I don't have anything prepared. That's for later when we get to the scoreboard. So if you have any questions, pop them in. We've got a few here already. Hazafa says, was watching England versus New Zealand. A lot of batters seem to be getting out this wider line of attack. Is this the newest bowling tactic after the batters got used to the wobble ball? Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say the batters have got used to the wobble ball at all. By average, at the moment, the averages around the world seem very low. But what we are seeing is that I think a lot of the players who were making runs or have been making runs don't mind the ball sort of more straight at them. And so there's a few guys, I've talked about this, Jaiswal being one, Kaminda Mendis being another one, Rachin Ravindra. I've seen them do it to Harry Brook, where they are bowling very, very wide to these players, like far wider than in some cases that you would kind of ever really expect. Far wider than, say, someone like Virat Kohli, right? You're trying to bowl outside off stump to Virat Kohli. You're trying to bowl outside off stump to Marnus Labuschagne. But this is way out there. I'm trying to think of what I said for Jaiswal. Was it 7, 8, 9 line, seventh stump and across? Some of the stuff I've seen of recent times have been even further. I think what England have been trying to do specifically to New Zealand is just throw the ball really, really wide, and they think that they will just keep playing their shots regardless. So I think there's also an element of that, and we've seen that to Brook at times from teams as well. So people are going to keep playing their shots. So if you keep the ball wide to players who will keep playing their shots with catches there, I think you're a good chance of getting them out. So I think that's a big element to it. But it'd be interesting because, you've noticed that I think I talked about it a week or so back. I think I might have even talked about it on the Morning Glory not that long ago as well, or the scoreboard of it's really, really obvious what teams are doing now. And there seems to be a lot of younger players coming through who the wide ball is their weakness, which is bizarre. Grove says, only roll out of the Indians, top 4 defended with soft hands, and art with earlier generation of Indian batters had mastered. Yeah, I mean, everyone is different. Like, Virat Kohli has never been particularly, a soft hands type player. You've got someone like Marnus Labuschagne, who is very much soft hands, maybe AUSvIND Khawaja. Not all top order players are. They all go about it very differently. This idea of a previous generation did it this way and our generation does it that way. Like, you're going to have very different kinds of players. So I'm not completely. I'm not too worried about that. They weren't going out because of their hands going too hard at the ball, though. They were playing shots. All 3 players went out playing shots. If you play a ball, if you're playing a ball to score it, you're not using soft hands anyway. So, yeah, that has nothing to do with what we just saw with the wickets. The difference between the Aussie top 3 and Jaiswal, Gill and Kohli couldn't be overstated. Has baseball gotten so much in the air, they cannot see how the Aussies negated the new ball's last 2 innings. Again, Gaurav, I think you've... Which top 3 would you rather have? Right? Um, it's a very different top three. You've got Marnus, who's trying to find form. You've got McSweeney, who obviously scores comically slow, and Usman Khawaja, who takes a long time to get going. Right? They have been successful in the last couple of innings, but they obviously struggled up until that point. Then you have Jaiswal, who likes to hit the ball, Gill, who likes to hit the ball, and Kohli, who's not actually in the top three anyway. If you look at the wickets, it's really, and this is why looking at wickets is really important. You had a loose ball on the pads that he probably tried to chip, when he maybe should have just let it come to him, perhaps, because it was a loose ball. And because of that, it maybe held up the wicket a little bit or straightened a little bit. And he's ended up just flicking it in the air. But that is a full ball on the pads, like over pitch ball on the pads, generally not going to get you out in Test cricket. You look at the Gill one, it's over pitched, outside off stump, and he kind of scoops it to gully. So it's a very, very odd dismissal. Neither of those are good balls. Both of them were overpitched. Both were probably on the wrong line, and they're both out. And then you've got the Kohli one, which is, I think he was getting rattled a little bit by the bounce. So he had two balls really react oddly off the surface. One of which was, I think, a leading edge that he almost popped back to the bowler. And the other one that reared up at him. I don't think his was a particularly good shot, and I don't think he'd be particularly happy with it. But if you look at the balls so far, again, that one was a fine ball. Like compared to the other two, it was the best of the wicket balls. But it wasn't as if that ball was a genius level ball. It didn't seem all that much. I mean, I'd have to have a look at Hawkeye to see, how much it went, but it probably went away a little bit, would be my guess, which is sometimes enough. But I think it was the other balls that we have seen so far, the two, I think, to Rahul that took off, and the two that acted a little bit weird to Kohli that probably played a part. He clearly wanted to drive early on. So I'm not 100% sure. His is the only one where I'm like, I don't really understand why he was so keen to play those shots when he could have left those balls. But the other two guys, I'm like, those are pretty poor balls. Like, I think if you bowl those balls to the Australian top order, I think they would have tried to flick the ball off their pads, and they would have probably tried to drive the loose ball outside off stump that was overpitched. They went out to both of them. Now he says, is there anything about Jaiswal's technique that would suggest he struggles against left armers, or is it just a small sample size? He got a very good ball in another innings, and early on, I think that could happen to anyone. And this was a poor ball. I mean, the only thing I would say about this is he also overly attacked the ball, that he hit for four. That was a far bigger mistake than the one that got him out, realistically. The one that got him out was full and straight, and he chipped it up. There's nothing in that made me think that the left armer played a part in it. But you'd have to go through all the way to have a good look at that. Rat says, what is the game plan for India now? So who they've gone out there, he's probably going to keep attacking. It's funny, Gora's been talking about the other guys. I think they got full balls that they overly went for. That were normal balls that a top order player would play those shots to. I don't think that's, with Rishabh, I think we're going to see him probably come a little bit harder. Rahul's just going to try and stick in. I don't know. I was told, what time is it? Brisbane now. Yeah, I was told by a friend who studies these things that at about 1:30 Brisbane time was when they thought the rain might come in and not leave. So it is very big chance that they'll be on and off at best. And worst case scenario, we might not see a lot of cricket from here on in throughout the rest of the day. So I think if I'm Rishabh, I would just bat the way that I bat. They've got you know, if he wants to defend, that's fine. I'm not sure that's his best option with the way that he bats. But Carroll is just going to hang in. So Carroll hanging in at one end, and then you've got Rishabh playing the way he does at the other. The ball's not going to keep doing what it's doing. I think what we're seeing here is a perfect situation of two different bowlers, a slightly different situation in the game. And as I said yesterday, I thought this was a new ball wicket. And weirdly enough, that's why I'd be really annoyed if I was India. As I've lost 2 wickets to balls that really shouldn't have got us out, when there's been a couple of others that really could have got you out from nowhere. That one that was punched by Carroll, I mean, what a ridiculous ball that was. Well, I think they said 70 centimeters higher. Terrifying. So all that should even out a little bit, right? And the ball, when it gets a little bit softer, should certainly play a lot different than it is right now. So I don't think there's the way that the two players are going to try and get that ball softer. One is late and soft, leave a lot of balls, and Rishabh Pant's going to try and upset Australia's line and length, and then hopefully between the two of them, they, get that away. That's what they're hoping. The other thing I would be looking at as well is if they do try and rush back on, or they're playing when there's a little bit of mist of like just trying to hit the ball in the outfield and soften it up. The actual style, I think you have to still back the way that you play. But yeah, they were playing to draw anyway. Certainly playing to draw. Ooh. Samov says, certainly now Virat is out of the top 50 batters list. No, it's not. That's not how these things work. Gordon Greenidge, Javed Miandad, who else? There's a bunch of players who at the end of their careers completely tanked their careers. What you are looking at is what you were looking at is perhaps a player at the end of his career, but he just made 100 in Australia a couple of weeks ago. If he played for another 2 or 3 years and continued to be this bad, you would probably have a position where you would move him down a little bit. So I think Ricky Ponting probably is lower in our estimations because he kept playing on when he was struggling. It was a good batting era, so his numbers don't look as bad as Virat Kohli's, but we've looked them up before. Ricky Ponting really struggled for a long time towards the end. What Kohli is really is a peak batter, and his peak was so outstanding that he's still obviously in the top 50 batters of all time. Anyone who's looking beyond that is not looking at the right things. So no, definitely. He had already cemented his place in the top 50. He's well before this period. AA says, at this point, it's just frustrating to watch Virat and Rohit on the field. Many careers ended post 2011 Border-Gavaskar. It looks like this Border-Gavaskar could be the end for these two. Coming into this series, AA, that's what everyone was saying about the Australians, right? That, I mean, obviously Warner had already gone. We're talking about the aging fast bowlers. There's Usman Khawaja, Steve Smith. This is just normal comment from when your team is losing when they're older. I mean, we did think that those guys might leave anyway. Now that the World Test Championship, especially, I mean, India can't win this game, and it's going to be a draw at best for them. I've been saying from the start, I expect retirements. There's a couple of aging players on both sides. Sam says, how difficult it is for someone like Kohli to be able to resist playing balls on the 5th and 7th stump line. He feels much easier said than done for someone who has a lot of success with that shot. Yeah, I've been talking about that really for a long time with Kohli. I think particularly why I think he has an issue with the wobble ball is the wobble ball is full of on that length. And it basically it pulls him into the shot that he wants to play, which is that sort of drive on the up. And there's a difference between Jimmy and I mean, now looking back on it, what Jimmy Anderson did to him was kind of the what was going to happen to him all around the world. Steve Smith players, and I don't know if any of you saw the Steve Smith interview yesterday. It was fascinating, where he was basically saying, "Look, I change things all the time." And when I talked to Raul Driver for the book about Sachin Tendulkar, it was like, do you know how hard it is to change something like, in the middle of a game or at the start of the game? Like, most players, if they've done anything like that, have done it beforehand. And someone else I talked to said something similar about, and talking about Sachin again. Steve Smith's doing what Sachin did on a few occasions, but even more often, right? Most batters don't do that. I remember there was a period where Ricky Ponting, West Indies basically worked out that Ricky Ponting, what you wanted to do is bowl 7th stump, 8th stump line and drag him across, because he wouldn't leave for that long. He would eventually start to play them, and he would play them outside the line, and without getting his head over the ball, and cause himself some trouble. And Ricky Ponting just sort of fell for that, consistently, right? That's the sort of thing that Steve Smith and Sachin Tendulkar and probably Bradman, those sorts of level players, maybe Gavaskar, Hutton, who I think those are the sorts of players that would work out a method to be able to handle that. Kohli hasn't, right? And that's why they're not quite at the top level. But that's why there's other batters above Ponting and Kohli, because of their abilities to work through those sorts of problems, and not go through through a huge run of that. But at the same time, it's not particularly easy, because with Kohli and this particular ball, you're talking about his strength as a batter has also become his weakness as a batter. That is probably the hardest thing to overcome for any particular player in any sport. If it's not your overall strength. So I compared the piece I did a few years ago. It's on the main site, Sampa, is the whole idea of Sachin taking his cover drive away at Sydney. That was quite a big deal, and I talked to a lot of different players who brought that up specifically when they were talking about the batting for the book. But the big reason that Sachin can do that is because Sachin's cover drive wasn't what actually fueled his batting, right? It's a bit like the Steve Smith thing and moving across the line. When Steve Smith has been in trouble moving across the line, there isn't really another option to go to, because that is actually the center of his batting. And Kohli's center of his batting is this ability to drive balls that other players cannot, from just outside off stump, straight through covers, and put pressure back on the bowler, because they can't bowl what is their normal delivery. So they have to bowl a little bit shorter to him. And now that doesn't work. That is a fascinating one, because you're not talking about, just putting the cover drive away or just putting the hook shot away. You're not talking about leaving balls outside of stump or anything else. That you're taking away your central way of scoring, of putting pressure back on the bowlers. And it's, if you look at the ball sort of full outside of stump, angling back in. So, and you look at the Fab Four, Kane Williamson is going to play that by playing it very late, slightly open bat face, steering that probably between third slip and gully area, maybe even backward point for him. And he's thinking, as long as I don't edge this, directly behind, I can get a couple of runs there and get myself off strike. That same ball to Joe Root, he has the ability to just, with soft hands, hit it to between backward point and sort of cover point and point. And it's very hard to set a field to that. And he's so good with his hands that, he's always going to get off strike with that. That same ball to Steve Smith, he's going to hit weirdly to square leg, right? And that's how he's going to get off strike. And with Kohli, it's the drive. Exact same ball, 4 players, 4 different shots. The other 3 shots are, only Smith has a high degree of risk to it. But because Smith has incredible hand-eye coordination, and because it's almost impossible to set a field to, he can get away with that at a certain point. Kohli's one is the one that is probably bringing the slips and everything else most into play. And before the wobble ball, it wasn't an issue at all. And then after the wobble ball, he hasn't been able to adapt and change his game in the same way that you would have liked him to. Having said that, that was also a period where at home he hasn't made any runs because the wicket's been ragging sideways. So you can never tell if these two things are related as well. But Steve Smith hasn't really changed his style, even when it hasn't worked either. And that's because you're talking about a strength and literally how they bat. And so they're very different than, let's say, putting away a traditional cover drive. Oh, I keep nicking off on the cover drive. I just won't play the cover drive. No, coming on the front foot and pushing that ball through the offsides is Kohli's method. Very different. Fascinating too. Umpire strikes back. Australia top order has successfully seen off 30 overs twice now, but with a lot of criticism about lack of runs. How should we view the success failure of the top three? Look, I think I said in Adelaide that their top three set up Travis Head, and it was kind of ignored. I said that Marnus batted better, so did exactly what they needed to do. Australia's top order has been very defensive for a long time now. Outside of Warner when he was in it, Marnus and Khawaja have certainly been a lot more defensive and doing that. That has been their role. And again here, they did very well. It was really hard conditions for McSweeney and Khawaja, and I suppose Marnus when he came out as well. Oh no, sorry, less so Marnus because his was the next day, wasn't it? But McSweeney and Khawaja had to see off the new ball 3 times, right? On a helpful pitch against Bumrah, Siraj and Akash both bowling very good spells in there at various times also. So was really, really good. Whether we're seeing a situation where, I said from the start that I thought Australia's strength in this series was going to be 5, 6, 7. That's basically what's played out, right? That is where they've got Australia into really good positions, and where they have struggled is perhaps when they've had to come in really early. When they haven't had to come in really early, they've been, Head's been able to capitalize on the fact that Bumrah's sort of finished his first or second spells at times, and then Head has come in. Marsh hasn't made a lot of runs at the moment, but chipped in a couple of times, and of course then the other one that we've seen there is is Carey. What, twice as well, coming in, in good situations and being able to help Australia. So if you're 5, 6, 7, and I sort of taking Smith out of this a little bit because he was the one I couldn't factor in as much. But if you're 5, 6, 7, oh my god, I'm just seeing that Jaiswal wicket again. It's ridiculous. If you're 5, 6, 7 is your strength. We saw that with England for a long time, where they sort of had Sibley, Burns, Bazball, Crawley, Joe Denley, those sorts of guys at the top, just getting them into a position where they could make runs later on, because that was where their strength is. Perhaps that's where Australia is at the moment. But this is a new ball wicket. I kind of called that one yesterday, and watching what's happened with the bounce and everything today, it looks even more like a new ball wicket now than it did yesterday. And so if you can give your top order 100, 120 balls, and they don't make a lot of runs on a wicket like this, then later on you're in a good position. I think Australia's had so much success with Warner and Hayden and Slater, and those kinds of players traditionally, and Australia really likes having an attacking opener where possible. That sometimes we forget that just if you don't have a player like that out there, and obviously at the moment there isn't, unless Constas comes through, there isn't really an obvious player like that who can come through. You just have to get through the new ball, especially in Australia, where I know modern Australia is a little bit different, but still softening that ball a little bit and changing things up is a huge advantage. And the top order has managed to do that, and it's worked very well so far. But that's me done. I don't think I had any super chats. No, I didn't have any super chats there. Really good questions at the top. So there's probably like a bunch of questions I never got to further on. But thank you all for coming on again. And we will be back after the day's play with the scoreboard. I'm assuming we will get some rain breaks from here on in. But let's hope we get a lot of cricket and see what India does next, because Been fascinating so far.
Cricket media used to be pretty simple. Find your favourite newspaper, head to Cricinfo, and maybe a blog you like. Now just finding the best stories and writing is a huge challenge. You already have a job. You just want to read about cricket. Well, that is what the best of cricket is currently doing. They go out daily to find the newest cricket coverage and the best stories from any publication in the world. And when they can't discover what they want, they also hire some of the best writers to produce their own great stories. You can get the best of cricket via their website or on WhatsApp. They find cricket's best stories and give them to you every day.